Hey, welcome to the Latoya Carr Show. Where is my handbook? The name was inspired because life comes at such a fast pace and it does not come with a handbook. Therefore, this podcast will talk about the many different facets of everyday living, and that can include parenting, business, family, friendships, relationships, basically everything that you will sit at your kitchen table and talk about. I started the podcast on anchor.fm. For those of you that are listening who may be wanting to start your own podcast, go to anchor.fm to start your own podcast. It is free and very easy to navigate. Again, welcome to the Latoya Carr Show. Where is my handbook? Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Latoya Carr Show. Where is my handbook? This show is about parenting, about relationships, about all the things that life can throw at you. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump into our episode for today. And our episode for today's title is Fear Keeps You Stuck. With that being said, we're going to talk about why fear keeps you stuck. Do you even realize that you were dealing with fear? Do you even realize that you were stuck? And what can you do to help yourself get unstuck? So, what we're going to talk about first is why people are actually stuck. Why does fear keep you stuck? So, what brought about this episode was I was having a conversation with an old coworker, and we were just talking, and she was just saying how, well, so you don't mind jumping out there and doing different things. Basically, I don't mind doing the unknown, right? And her thing was, she's used to being complacent. She's used to being comfortable. And ultimately, I feel like us as a whole, as a human race, we all get comfortable in situations. We all get complacent because we are creatures of habits, right? And so we were just chatting. I was like, I think that will be a good podcast episode because so many of us have so many different dreams or so many different things that we would like to do, but we become complacent, we get comfortable, and we just get used to our normal day-to-day routine with doing things. And I mean, who wants to fix something that's not broke, right? Yeah, so ultimately, although we may have dreams, although we may have goals and we want to do something different or we see something different for our lives, the reality of it is far more easier to stay where you are than to go into the unknown, than to jump in the unknown, especially if you're jumping in head first. So, I believe that a lot of times, you may be called to something or you may be really good at something, but again, it is the unknown. And so that fear creeps in because you have people that may be in your corner saying, oh, this is really good, or you're really good at that. But then in the back of your mind, you're like, okay, yeah, I think I am good at that. I think I would be good at doing this long term. However, number one reason for fear or being stuck can be money. So for instance, for my entrepreneurs out there who are, you may have a regular 9 to 5, but you still have that entrepreneur spirit. And so you do things on the side. You have side hustles. Okay. So for the average entrepreneur who has a 9 to 5, who has a side hustle, and who really wants to get away from that 9 to 5, that fear of that steady paycheck or that steady income coming in can really be scary. Like that fear is real because you're used to getting that weekly paycheck or that every 2 weeks. You know what's coming in, you know what's going out. And so you have that cushion. So that fear can easily creep in and be like, okay, listen here, bro. Or listen here, sis. Like, that's real cute what you're doing, but how we going to make ends meet? If you decide to quit your job today or tomorrow, how are you going to make ends meet? The other part of that can be my entrepreneurs who are, look, I love my 9 to 5. Yes, I'm an entrepreneur on the side, but I'm good with where I'm at. And so a lot of times people that are good with where they are, they really don't. It's like, okay, it is what it is. I have my 9 to 5, like I have my steady income. So if it doesn't work out, I don't have to worry about that. And so with them, sometimes the fear is, again, people taking you seriously, or, who's going to purchase your stuff. But the fear is not as significant because you still have your check coming in. So we have two things that we talked about. The entrepreneur that's trying to leave their 9 to 5. Then you got the entrepreneur that's like, okay, it is what it is. Both of those you still have the fear characteristic or trait or whatever that has crept up in your mind, right? So fear doesn't also, I'm an entrepreneur. Everybody that knows me know that, like, that's my thing. When I was in the military, I was dibbling and dabbling in different things. When I went to the federal government, I was dibbling and dabbling in different things as well. And I still always had that entrepreneur spirit. I still was always like, look, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but ultimately I'm smarter than these people. Like, why do I have to sit here and listen to these stupid meetings, or listen to people? We basically meeting to meet again. Like, there's no real agenda. There's nothing really that we're talking about here. There's just people that sound good and they have a title that's high up the chain. But I always, when I have these podcasts, I have to bring myself into it because it's so much easier to, I can sit here and I can talk to you all day about fear or about relationships or about parenting, but I know that people really want to hear, it's more believable when you can actually relate. So I'll talk about some of the things that have you stuck, and then I'll also talk about things that had me stuck and what is helping me get unstuck, because I recently, dove into the full-time entrepreneurship world. And so when you have had a certain mindset for so long, you can still be in a mindset that you don't even realize, right? And so that kind of brings me to my next topic of, have you been stuck so long that you don't even realize it? A lot of times we're just stuck, and it's like, okay, you're stuck, but do you even know that you're stuck? Because stuck for me cannot necessarily be stuck for someone else, because we all have different mind frames and how we think about things. And honestly, you can be living in something for so long, you don't realize that you're stuck. So if you have a certain way of how you do things in your mind, until that changes, until something happens in your life to change that mindset that you have, you're not going to feel like there's anything wrong with your thinking. And so thinking has a lot to do with everything that we do in life. So we talking about fear and why we fearful and why we're stuck. Like all of that has to do with your thinking. So for me, in you know, being in the military, uh, being in the federal government for a long time, I grew up. Whereas, you know, oh yeah, you in the service, you gonna retire, you gonna have a good government job. Like certain mindsets of people, especially when you're a kid, it can be, you grow up with certain things and so it grows up in you. When I joined the military, I didn't know if I would, if I wanted to retire. Like you have some people that came in and they knew they wanted to do at least 20 years because they wanted to retire. I never was that one to say, oh, I want to retire. But I also wasn't the one to say, you know, when I first came in, it didn't really matter. Like it was a job. I had met great people. Um, it was doing what it was supposed to do. It was benefiting me. I was getting my experience. And so I didn't come in really with the game plan of retiring. As time went on, I started realizing that, yeah, this might not be the thing that I want to do long term, but I also was a single parent. So you have the thought of, yeah, this might not be it, but what else are you going to do? And the question, what else are you going to do? It wasn't to be like, oh, you're not that smart. There's nothing else you can do. It was more so of, you have this steady check every 2 weeks. You have your routine schedule with your son. You have your routine schedule of, clinic hours. You know what your daycare fees are. What would the next look like outside of that? What would the next look like? And so that's what I'm talking about when I talk about, fear. It doesn't have to, it's your thinking. It's not necessarily like, oh, this really scares it. It's your thinking that you don't even realize is fear. And so when I did finally decide that I was going to get out the military, the people around me were fearful. And so that's the other thing. Like we have to be careful of not allowing people's thoughts or feelings to become ours. One of my good girlfriends was just not having it at all. She thought that was just the craziest thing because, again, your thinking plays a major part. And her thinking was, why wouldn't you just retire? And in my mind, my thinking was, you never stepped foot in a uniform. So how dare you even question my decision? My mom's thinking was, why would you do this? Why wouldn't you retire? What are you going to do? And all of these questions. And I'm just like, look, at the end of the day, I ain't no dummy. I am in the DMV area where jobs are plentiful and we're going to make this work. And so all of that sounded good. Like I was telling them, like, basically, get out my face. Like, I got this, whatever, whatever. But as the time, um, shortly after I got my notification that your date is set in stone to get out the military, fear kicked in. And subconsciously, fear kicked in because while I was telling these people like I got this, whatever it is, what it is, I had to then, start like definitely get into survival mode kind of kicked in. Like, okay, I'm used to this routine. So what am I going to do for a job? What about for housing? What about for before and after care? And so, because of the thoughts that were continuously playing in my mind, I decided that I was going to move to South Carolina. Now, I left home at 17 years old, but my thinking was, I can use my post 9/11 bill, GI Bill. And if I stay with my mama, like I can really save some money. And so I was just like, okay. So at that time, my son would go to South Carolina during the summers. Y'all, I was home for 3 days and I was like, yeah, I lied. I realized I cannot do this. I don't care what kind of fear has kicked in. But what I do know is, again, I ain't no dummy. And so, whatever I need to do to make it for me and my son, that's what's going to happen. Because what I will not do is move back to South Carolina. And, you know, sometimes that's what it takes for us to get out of our own thinking. That's what it takes. Like for me, it took being home for 3 days and being like, girl, you do not really want to move back to South Carolina. But it would have been um easier. Because I definitely can't say it would have been more comfortable because comfort plays a big part in fear as well. But it would have been more easier because I wouldn't have to worry about ends meet. So needless to say, I ended up staying in the DMV area and have been here since. I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast so far. We are again talking about fear and how fear can keep you stuck. I hope you are staying tuned and also sharing this podcast. All right. Keep listening, folks. Um, and so, I just really wanted to do this podcast because, again, like when I was having a conversation with my old coworker, with my old friend, it just dawned on me like, man, we really can't hold ourselves back. Like, why would you be good at something or why would you feel like God has called you to do something, but you rather stay stuck? And some people would be like, well, it's not that I'd rather stay stuck. I'm just stuck. But if you're not doing anything about it, then to me, you rather stay stuck, right? Like, if you're good at something and people are constantly telling you, like, oh, well, you can make money off of this, or this is really good. Maybe you should try A, B, and C, but you choose to do a different route. It's kind of crazy. And so don't worry, you're not the only one because I have to talk to myself about that as well. Like we have so many talents and so many good things that we just sit on. And we sit on it because it's like, I'll get to it later. Especially again, I can't stress this enough. I know I stressed it when I first started out, but especially when we have another job because the thinking is always going to go back to comfort. It's always going to go back to comfort because it's like, I don't need to stress. I don't need to do anything different. It's not broke. We don't need to fix it. If I get some extra money, that's good. But if not, that's fine too because I have a steady flow. But my question is, what happens if that steady flow goes away? They always I've been reading lately within the last years that you have to have at least 7 different streams of income. Seven. Some of us barely have one. So what talents are we really sitting on? What is that thing that you've been doing on the side, but it's like, I'm gonna put it off, I'm not ready for it? Like, what is something that you've been doing or can be doing, but you're just not all the way into it because you have steady income? Because ultimately, being an entrepreneur isn't for everybody. So that's definitely not what this podcast is about. It just happens, like, for me, it just made sense to talk about it. But fear can keep you stuck from doing a lot of things. So entrepreneurship is not for everybody, and I know that. So that's not what this is about. But when I mentioned having 7 multiple streams, like, that can be investments, that can be a lot of different things that keeps us stuck. Because even with, like, when you look at investments or you look at stocks, it's like, for me, I'll be quick to tell you, like, I don't really know anything about it. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And so I have to ask myself too, like, okay, so what's holding you back from looking at all the knowledge that's out there to at least learn, to at least invest in one thing? Because truth be told, people talk about, the best stocks to get and all of these other things. Sometimes the best stocks to get, we can't even afford it. And we just need to be honest with ourselves. But at the same time, I was on a Facebook post a week or two ago about stocks. And I was like, I mentioned 2 stocks that would be good, that if I had, like, right now, like, I would buy into it. And someone came and was like, well, that's not even enough to buy into it. Well, that's fine. It doesn't have to be enough, but you can buy parts of a share. You don't have to buy a whole share. And so that right there goes back to what I said earlier about people and their negativity and their thoughts or their feelings being placed on you. Now, the person that, came and commented probably didn't mean to be negative, but to me it was. So let's talk about, what does being stuck look like? What does being stuck look like? So we talked about your thinking and how, your thinking plays a major part in fear, in being stuck. But what does being stuck actually look like to you? Because for me, being stuck looks like, how they say insanity is you're doing the same thing over and over again, like, and you getting the same results. Like, that's what being stuck looks like to me. Being stuck to me looks like I'm on a doggone hamster wheel. Like, I'm just going around and around and I'm not getting anywhere. What does not getting anywhere look like? Not getting anywhere can look like, oh, you know what? I wrote down my dreams. I wrote down my goals. But instead, I'm going to watch Real Housewives of Atlanta because there's a new season coming up. And I'll get to that later. Being stuck can look like, oh, you know what? I wrote up this proposal They turned me down. So I'ma just put that on the back burner. I'll come up with something later. Okay. Being stuck can look like, well, I know I got my master's degree, but I applied for all these jobs on USA Jobs, but I'm only right now, they're only handing out GS7s. But I've been doing this job for a while. At my job, my current job, they're only handing out GS7s. So maybe I'll just apply for that because I'm comfortable here. I mean, I did see some jobs on USA Jobs that, they go to a 12, they start at a 9, but I don't know if I'm qualified. I don't know if I want to give up my telework day. I don't know if I want to give up my compressed work schedule. Those are examples of being stuck. You know you got the tools, you know you got the skills, you know that all you got to do is try, but yet you stay in your same spot because it's comfortable. That is what being stuck looks like. Why would you want to sit in a place that isn't benefiting you? Because I'm going to tell you, the people that you looking at on Real Housewives of Atlanta, the people that's doing the hiring for these jobs on USA Jobs or, wherever you may be, the people that are supposedly in higher positions than you, they're not stuck in terms of what's going to benefit them compared to you. So whoever you are listening to this podcast, you need to recognize what is keeping you stuck. Why are you stuck? And think about if you've been stuck so long and you really didn't realize it, what was there that was keeping you from realizing it? Because a lot of times, like we suppress a lot of things. We go through stuff and it's like, you know what? I've been going through this so long, I don't even have the energy. So that's now emotions that you've suppressed because you feel like you don't have the energy to deal with something. So you suppress it. So, we really let's talk about what we can do to help from being stuck. What we can do to help you from being stuck. To get you unstuck. What can we do? Number one, everyone that's listening, I would advise you to write something down that you wanted to do for a very long time. Something that you wanted to purchase for a very long time. Some place that you wanted to go for a very long time. Any one of those things, because there are a number of things that can keep you stuck. It's not just about a job or entrepreneurship. Even when it comes to a relationship, like having a conversation that you wanted to have for a long time, but couldn't find the words, didn't know how to do it. All of those are examples. So you write those things down. What did we talk about? We talked about write down a place that you wanted to go for a long time that you haven't been. Something that you probably wanted to purchase that you haven't purchased. Something that you probably wanted to do, a dream, a goal, a plan. Think about something along those lines, right? Okay, write that down. And then I want you to dream about how it would be if you were to go to that place, if you were to purchase that thing, if you were to have that conversation. What would that even look like for you? So once you figured out what that would look like, the last and final step, what action would I need to do? What action would I need to complete to get me there? Does that make sense? Because all of these 3 steps is key to success. It's key to getting over your fear. It's key to at least putting a step forward into helping you see that fear may have been that thing that was keeping you stuck. Because remember, we talked about in this episode, sometimes you can be in a place so long that you don't even realize that it's actually fear that's keeping you stuck there. So I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. I hope that you got at least one thing that was beneficial or that could have helped you get out of that, take steps at least to get you out of that stuck place. If you can, please share this podcast, share it to your family members, your friends, to anybody, just to help somebody that may be going through a similar situation. All right. We will talk to you guys next Friday and hope that you'll check back in. All right. Have a good one. Enjoy your weekend.